So I know all of the attention in zombies is on Black Ops 6 right now, and it might seem weird that I'm making a video on Black Ops 3 in 2024. This is kind of a follow-up video to something I made over 7 years ago, talking about the impossible Easter egg in zombies. There has been a major breakthrough thanks to SkyInit. I will leave his channel in the description. He made an excellent video on this topic, and the reason I decided to make one of my own is because, number one, it's cathartic for me to follow up on a video that has been unsolved for me for almost a decade at this point, but also I have some additional insight to add to this conversation. I've had conversations with Blundell himself, or I've heard things that definitely enlighten the situation a lot more. Now, let me give you a brief history on the impossible or unsolvable Easter egg in zombies. This has been the thing that has gripped my fascination in zombies ever since we heard about this. Now, in between the time of Shadows of Evil and Der Eisendrache, Jason Blundell released an interview in which he was talking about the history of Easter eggs, and that for Black Ops 3 he wanted to do something insanely different and add an Easter egg that is virtually impossible to solve. And with this in mind, when it came to conceptualizing what the impossible Easter egg could be, it ruled out a few things immediately. Number one, it would not be something that's baked into the game files. This is not an Easter egg that you can do that's going to unlock some kind of like secret weapon or a new part of the map, or something very tangible like that. It's not hard-coded into the game because we know at this point everybody's dug through the files of Black Ops 3, and all of the actual tangible Easter eggs in the game that can be solved, that have triggers and mechanisms within Black Ops 3, have more or less all been pulled from the code. So the Easter egg itself is not something that can be baked into the game. But this isn't exactly news, because we've known this from the start, and even before everybody dug through the files of Black Ops 3 to pull out everything that was in it, we've known this to be the case, that it's not going to be something that's solvable in-game. So what does that leave us with? Well, potentially ciphers. We know the thing with ciphers in zombies is that Jason Blundell maps specifically have a ton of them. In fact, there are multiple ciphers in Black Ops 3 to this day that have still yet to be solved. There is one left on Garad Crovey, there is one left on the Giant, and I believe there's like 10 or 11 on Revelations. That map has a lot that still has yet to be solved, which in my opinion still probably hold the juiciest insight into what the future of zombies was probably going to be. At this point in time, 7 years ago when I made this video, that is where my headspace was at. I thought this was going to be some kind of cipher, but not a traditional one that's just kind of put into a piece of paper on the ground. That's how they traditionally are. But my theory at the time was that in Shadows of Evil, which at the time was the map that Jason was kind of leading us to go take a look at, there are, a lot of these boards and neon signs around the map, and some of them are missing letters or they're burnt out. And I figured by gathering all of the missing letters in this, it would actually create our ciphered text that then needed to be solved. And maybe across maps there are other instances like this where there are letters or words missing that can compile into the cipher that then needs a key to be solved. And obviously this never really went anywhere. My leading theory was that all of the burnt out letters were somehow going to put together a text for us that would eventually reveal something, but that's just more or less another cipher that is still in the traditional method. But the fundamental thing that makes this Easter egg different conceptually to something like an in-game solvable Easter egg or even a cipher is the fact that he said it's spread across multiple arenas.
Going into Black Ops 3, I'm fed up now, and I'm going to really put one in that you guys can't break, and it'll be hidden in different arenas, and you won't get it.
Which is very odd wording. And then my entire theory about the burnt out letters in Shadows of Evil at that point kind of crumbled, and I didn't really investigate much further because that was the strongest theory I had up to that point. And once that didn't really pan out or go anywhere, I left this Easter egg alone, and it still bothered me in the back of my mind, but it was no longer something I was actively hunting. And I figured this would never be solved, or maybe it would be revealed by Treyarch or Jason Blundell in like a bunch of years' time by now. And in fact, he even mentioned that in an interview. He said, this is something I'm probably going to be talking about in about 8 years' time. This is really strange wording, as we are approaching the 8-year mark from when this interview and when the impossible Easter egg was talked about. However, we're still about a year away from that or so. And the thing is, Jason is most likely not going to talk about the impossible Easter egg. He's just completely doing his own thing right now. That just doesn't seem very realistic to me. I don't think he's gonna, make a YouTube video and tell us exactly what it was. However, I do find the timing of now we're making progress on this to be somewhat odd. And for years, the hunt for the unsolvable Easter egg continued. However, it slowly began to dwindle and eventually died out. This was until a video was made by SkyInit claiming to have solved or made progress on the impossible Easter egg, and this was a big claim given the weight of this situation. At this point, the community had no real leads, and that was until we realized that some of the pieces were there from the start. SkyInit makes a lot of interesting claims in which he talks about the significance of the KN-44. Now, for those of you who played Black Ops 3 a lot during its lifetime, this may sound familiar to you. For those of you who have never played Black Ops 3 or not much of it, this may not make much sense at all. Now, in order to understand this next part, we need to briefly talk about the history of the KN-44 in BO3 Zombies. The KN-44 was a weapon that makes a lot of strange and mysterious appearances in Black Ops 3 Zombies, and originally in the Black Ops 3 Alpha, this was called the ARAC. This had to be changed for legal reasons, and then it got changed to the ARC-7 during the Black Ops 3 Beta. However, when the full game released, the weapon got changed to the KN-44. This was difficult to understand why a weapon had its name changed twice. Typically, a name change in Call of Duty is not entirely uncommon. This has happened to a lot of weapons, including stuff in Black Ops 4. It's typically done for legal reasons of a weapon that exists in real life, and so they have to do that. However, this had its name changed from a completely usable name to the KN-44, and then the question then becomes why? Well, we had no real answers on this, and SkyInit claims to have spoke to a Treyarch dev that knows about the double name change, but doesn't really exactly know why this was done. This was a multiplayer developer, and so he may not have known everything about zombies and what was going on over there, but he claims that this was made in regards to a change for zombies. Now, just keep that in mind because that will become very important later on, but let's talk about the significance of the KN-44 and its weird and strange appearances within Black Ops 3 Zombies. This was something that fascinated me from the beginning of the game. Years ago, myself and many others in the community would notice the KN-44 appearing in odd places that it really didn't belong in, and most commonly you would see it when you're borderline breaking the game or looking in places maybe you shouldn't be. I believe this can be looked at metaphorically, which I will explain a bit more on later, but let's talk about a few of the weird appearances of the KN-44. In Dreisendrach, once Dempsey is coming down from the cryopod in space, KN-44 model will quickly fly into the ground with it. Also on Dreisendrach, under the vase for the Void Bow, a KN-44 can be spotted if you sort of clip under the map or look in theater mode. Why this is there? Again, we don't know, but it's an odd appearance. There is also a KN-44. Occasionally when you kill a zombie, it will just be holding it. This is very rare and I don't really know how to get this to trigger, but this can happen sometimes. When Takio dies in Zetsubo no Shima after the cutscene, he is in the cell with a KN-44. In many of the in-game cutscenes for Black Ops 3, you can see KN-44s being basically a placeholder model for the characters or other elements that are in the cutscene. In Gorod Krovi, Nikolai, for one singular frame, is holding a KN-44 instead. Also, weirdly enough, in the Call of Duty Zombies comic, the Ascension alternate loading screen, I actually went and double-checked this. I have a physical copy in my closet right now, and I went and looked at it, and Dr. Mani is holding a blueprint, signing off his name on it, of a KN-44. This is odd, and there are plenty other examples of the KN-44 being in weird and odd places in Zombies that you either wouldn't notice to look for, or you have to kind of more or less break the game in order to see them. Most people are not going to glitch out of an in-game cutscene in order to see the KN-44 models where the characters typically are. However, that could be relevant. There are countless other examples in which the KN-44 makes a weird appearance in Zombies, and it's not just Black Ops 3. There is a KN-57 in Black Ops 4. Now, its appearances are not quite as odd as they are in BO3, but it does exist in the game, and there's even a few instances where it appears in multiplayer maps for some reason. It's not entirely devoid of these odd appearances from this very specific weapon, and even though the numbers are slightly different, the KN remains the same, and that will be important later. A lot of the theory behind the KN-44 was that the KN meant something like Chronorium or whatever. That was essentially the best theory we had. However, that got quickly thrown out because there was no real significance to that, and also it just seemed a bit too simple and to fall into place too nicely for that to be the case. I don't believe that this actually means Chronorium. That just doesn't seem like a valid theory to me. Now, this was all to remind you and set up the significance of the KN-44 in Black Ops 3. This is clearly an outlier. It's been one of a kind. There's always been something more to this weapon. And you might say at this point, well, this is just purely coincidence. They just use the KN-44 models for like stuff in the game and they have no real relevance. I would say I would agree with you if it wasn't for two things. Number one is the Dr. Monty cutscene right here, or this Ascension loading screen where you can see him signing off on the Hypercube page. This is the other thing though. In the Giant, all of the scraps of paper when put together from that map make up this image. It is the summoning key with a Hypercube inside it with a KN-44 outline. Now let's turn our focus to the Hypercube for just a second, because this is still an unexplained mystery as well, and SkyInit very intelligently pointed out in his video that if you look up Hypercubes in unsolvable puzzles, you come across this. Stick with me, because this is where things get really weird. This video is about an impossible puzzle in which the premise is there are two prisoners and there is a chessboard, and on each square of the chessboard there is a coin either flipped heads or tails in various capacities, and the warden hides one key under one square on this chessboard. The prisoners are allowed to talk about their strategy beforehand, and the warden can essentially change the position of the key based on what they're talking about. And so the warden hides the key under one of these squares, and the prisoner 2 has to figure out which square the key is under by prisoner 1 only being able to flip one coin, and using a complex coded equation should tell them the position of this key. Now, if that doesn't make any sense, it gets even more strange, because you can essentially map this chessboard onto a 4-dimensional cube, otherwise known as a hypercube. Sound familiar? Now, it's a lot more complicated than this, and the video explained it much better than I ever will, but the premise is that you can essentially take one color and one vertice of this hypercube and figure out an entire solution where the branches and vertices of each orb or corner here would be the proper corresponding color, and you could fit it perfectly into this 4-dimensional cube, and thus you could also map it onto the chessboard, revealing your key. Now, if you take the chessboard as more of a binary code system, you could also look at it as error correction. You could apply a sort of error correction key to a problem, and then it should theoretically spit out the correct message. And you can even see that this theoretically could be used to solve ciphers or a hidden message, and you would need the exact coding and exact key to get the right one. Now, understanding the hypercube in the context of Black Ops 3 Zombies is rather difficult, and even just conceptually, because it's a cube that is a 4-dimensional space that we're trying to understand in 3-dimensional games, and that's very difficult to map, and so it becomes a lot more problematic to try to figure out what exactly does this relate to in Zombies. So understanding hypercubes is one thing. I mean, we've known that the summoning key theoretically has a hypercube in it, and we've known that since Black Ops 3. That's not exactly brand new news, and understanding hypercubes and 4-dimensional cubes can be, you know, a difficult challenge. Now, how does this relate to the KN-44? If for some reason you're still not convinced that the KN-44 is extremely relevant and part of this, there is a quote that you can directly get by playing as Jessica Rose in Shadows of Evil that I literally did this 20 minutes ago and got. If you buy the KN-44 off the wall, she can say this.
Perhaps just another piece of an unsolvable puzzle.
This is the only quote that we have that is a direct reference to an unsolvable Easter egg, and it's the only way to get this quote to trigger. That's pretty strange. Now, with all of that in mind, let's go back to our hypercube image for just a second, and if you remember, the summoning key has apothecon words written on it that can be translated, and with the orientation of the hypercube, we can see where different words are placed on here. It's got stuff like grow, servant, invade, rise, flesh, etc. You know, it's got these words, and so you could think of these as the orientation on the cube. Now let's keep that in our back pocket for just a second and then go back to the KN-44. We never really explained why the KN-44 had multiple name changes, and once again, the Chronorium explanation was just not incredibly satisfactory in this case. Now, when you start looking up 4-dimensional cubes and hypercubes for that matter, you start to realize that what they're measured in are K and N. You realize that when researching hypercubes and 4-dimensional cubes, they are almost primarily always measured in K K and N, so that explains the name change of the weapon, or does it? Now, this is where it's weird because we still have the KN, and maybe that's satisfactory in reference to the Hypercube. This could be exactly what it means, but then we still have 44. Maybe it's referencing a 4x4 cube, but then if you also think to Black Ops 4, we have the KN57. And I'm not totally sure if that number's relevant either, or if these need to be factors into figuring out the cube and the dimensions of it. And this is where my area of expertise begins to fall off, because I have no clue how I would go about solving that on a 4-dimensional cube. This is where a lot of complicated math gets involved, and where I am just not smart enough to do this on my own. I have no clue what to do with these numbers, and there doesn't seem to be an obvious solution here. Now, the other thing I want to talk about, and this is where it gets unbelievably insane, and this is where I have something to add to the conversation. You remember back to when I was talking about hypercubes, and specifically the chessboard, right? The chessboard idea was that there's a key hidden in one single tile, and you can only flip one coin, and the other prisoner needs to be able to find the solution of which tile holds the key by only one coin being flipped, and you could think of that as error correction in a way. The whole idea is that you need a specific starting point that is the coin that gets flipped, and, you know, if you're looking at it from the 4-dimensional cube perspective, it ends up being one of the corners with its vertices being a certain color. But you always have to wonder, is this the correct corner to start with, and is this the right corner for this solution? And this just made a connection in my brain that did not make sense until now. A lot of this hypercube math and solutions are mapped to starting points that are specifically illustrated in these 4-dimensional cube analogies. And when you strip the 4-dimensional element away, it should map perfectly to the chessboard that we had at the beginning. And this is where it gets crazy for me, because I got chills when I realized this. I was thinking about the conversation that I had with Jason Blundell in 2018 at the Black Ops 4 reveal event. I was talking to him briefly, and I brought up the impossible or the unsolvable Easter egg. And I essentially said, hey Jason, you know, I had a theory that I was working on, that I was going to go into Shadows of Evil and find all of the neon signs that are missing letters, and then put those together in some order, and that will make a cipher or decrypted message or something that is the impossible Easter egg. And he kind of just smirked at me and said, why are you so sure that's the right place to start? At the time, I thought he just meant by that's the right place to start, meaning map. Like, oh, maybe I shouldn't start in Shadows of Evil, maybe I should start in Der Eisendrache or something. I thought he meant like a literal place to start in terms of a map. But now, given what we know about hypercubes, I think what he's actually meaning is, how do you know that's the right place to start from the perspective of the 4-dimensional hypercube? If the place to start, quote unquote, is the coin that you flip that should provide the solution, he's basically saying, how are you sure that's the right coin to flip? If this theory is correct, that's what he was getting at, and it was sort of a double meaning this whole time. I spent years thinking that he meant that it was on a different map, and that kind of killed all of my interest in hunting on Shadows of Evil, and all of this KN nonsense really got put to rest. But now that we know what we know about hypercubes and 4-dimensional impossible puzzles, this quote makes a lot more sense. So everything from this point is going to be speculation based on what I know about things that I've talked to with Jason, or stuff that he's talked about with zombies, and the direction he wanted to take the mode, and stuff that I know. And so what I feel like maybe this could have been in reference to, this entire hypercube situation didn't really seem to have much relevance come BO4. Not that it wasn't related, and the KN was still in the game, albeit under a different name, but the hypercube didn't seem to have much of an impact. The KN wasn't placed as commonly as it was in Black Ops 3, and the point is, this seemed to be a very Black Ops 3 centered thing. I don't think this really extended much into BO4, but if it did, I think the way that it was going was more explaining the 4th dimension, and especially the dichotomy between the Shadowman and Dr. Monty, as evidence given by Dr. Monty signing off on this blueprint sheet. Given that we were supposed to have a Great War map in Black Ops 4 in which we face off against Dr. Monty and the Shadowman, and also they were toying with the idea of giving Samantha powers that never really came to fruition. Weirdly enough, that ended up being relevant in Cold War, but this idea was being toyed with all the way back in Black Ops 3 and 4. And you can tell that in that same Ascension poster that we talked about earlier, I find it odd that one of the panels is Samantha looking into a gobblegum machine, as if those hold lots of power. I don't know, that's a little bit of speculation, but I know they wanted to toy with the idea of giving Samantha power later on in the game, and that's kind of where it was heading. You can also see that at the end of the Alpha Omega cutscene, she has this power, and it never really goes goes anywhere. My theory with the Hypercube is potentially this is some kind of metaphor in regards to Shadow Man and Dr. Monty, that instead of these two being a dichotomy looked at as the same person, but maybe just two sides of a coin, instead of being looked at even three-dimensionally either, it's possible that the Hypercube is Dr. Monty and the Shadow Man being four-dimensional, almost too complex for us to comprehend, that the Shadow Man and Dr. Monty are many things. They're not just Dr. Monty or the Shadow Man incarnate, they are four-dimensional in nature. It's just one of my own theories, otherwise I have no clue why Dr. Monty would be signing off on the Hypercube image, but I do think that this leads to some very interesting things, and potentially there's even more buried underneath this. We have what we have on the summoning key, plus these numbers that could be the dimensions of the cube, but so far this hasn't really netted anything, but that doesn't mean nothing isn't there. This just brought that crazy memory back for me, what Jason Blundell said to me at that event about starting point, and when I was watching this video about this Hypercube and the starting point of the solution and the colors, my jaw literally dropped, because now it makes a lot more sense, and I don't know if it was purely coincidence or a double meaning that he was meaning the entire time, but I took it too literally in the beginning, and I thought he just meant the map that I was looking on. At this point, given the conversation I had with Jason, all of the advancements with the KN-44, and understanding what the impossible Easter egg is, I believe this is it now. Is there an actual solution to this? I don't know, because once again, it's an impossible Easter egg. The entire point of that video is that there is no actual solution, or that the solution can always be thwarted by the warden that can change the key, and I don't know if that's relevant, but the entire point I'm getting at is maybe it's not something that's meant to be solved. Perhaps it is, but perhaps this was designed to stump us forever. I don't even know if this has a solution behind it. Once again, there's a lot of ciphers and revelations and even the giant and Garad that have not yet been solved, but I don't think those would be helpful or relevant to solving this particular Easter egg. The most we have are the numbers off of the KN, the fact that this is a Hypercube, which is referenced by the KN-44 itself, and we have the summoning key that's within it with these words, but that's really about it, and I don't know if we have enough information to really pull something meaningful out of this. It's possible we do, but also we have to wonder, the only thing that can really come out of it is a message or information. This Easter egg is not something that can be hard-coded into the game. It's not going to give you something we've never seen before. It can be information, and I wonder what that information might be if it is actually solvable. But either way, I wanted to make this video because I had something to add to this, and it was more or less cathartic for me to make a follow-up video that something I talked about over 7 years ago. But it made that quote and that conversation I had with Jason completely click in my mind, and I wanted to make a video about it. But I can't believe I made a Black Ops 3 Zombies video in 2024. It just goes to show how much we really cared about this and how emotionally attached we were, that I still actually give a shit about an Easter egg that was essential to like my childhood and brain's development. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Leave a like and subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.